It's much more civilized!
When one thinks of sci-fi in modern pop culture, the name Star Trek is undeniably one of the first things that comes to people's minds. Having been around for 69 years since it aired for the first time in 1966, the series has grown to become one of the greatest spacefaring sagas of all time. As the franchise has continued to go where no man has ever gone before over the years, the number of Trekkies, which is the name given to the fans of the series, has only continued to grow. 69 years is a long time, and that means our heroes have had plenty of foes to contend with over the years. From Shakespeare-quoting villains to people responsible for wiping out entire star systems, the crew of the USS Enterprise has had to contend with their fair share of diabolical and comical. In today's marvelous video, though, we're here to talk about the 10 strongest villains of the franchise. Join us as we go back in time and scour every single movie, TV show, video game, and other medium to find the absolute strongest foes that we certainly would not want to come across during our sojourns through space. So without wasting any more time, beam us up, Scottie. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Q. Let's kick things off with a villain who's arguably one of the strongest beings in the Star Trek universe. Known simply as Q, he's a part of the Q Continuum, a race of aliens who, by human standards, are all but omnipotent and immortal. They're capable of feats that we humans would ordinarily attach to the supernatural. He's a member of his race and seems to operate on his own whim. The USS Enterprise first encounters him in the year 2364 when he suddenly appears aboard the USS Enterprise D, warning the crew to return immediately back to their native star system and abandon their mission. He called humanity a dangerous, savage child race and believed them to be unworthy of spreading their roots across the vast universe. Picard, however, manages to convince him that humanity has long since discarded its savage ways and has become much more transcendental. To prove this, Q asked them to successfully complete their mission by reaching Farpoint Station. In answer to this challenge, the crew manages to skillfully navigate their way to their destination, and along the way, manages to not only discover but also aid a spaceborne entity that has been forced to take the form of a starbase. Satisfied, but still skeptical about humanity, Q disappears at that time, promising the crew that this was not the last they had heard from him. He continues to appear throughout the course of the franchise at various points with dangerous tests that he puts our heroes through, claiming to test humanity's worth. While he may not be chaotic evil in the truest sense, there is no doubt about the damage he causes thanks to his actions. Q has been modeled after trickster gods like Loki, and he views humanity as lesser beings to be toyed with for his own amusement. Although he's seen calling Picard his friend eventually towards the end, Q seems to enjoy toying with the captain of the Enterprise D the most. He's capable of time traveling and warping reality to his whim. Often described as petulant and obnoxious Q, it might seem that he simply likes to treat humans as playthings, and while this might not be entirely false, his actions often lead us to suspect that there's more to his actions than it seems. While the Star Trek universe embraces all-powerful beings as a regular occurrence in the franchise, Q is perhaps the most powerful amongst both good and evil characters of this sort. The Borg Queen. Every spacefaring sci-fi franchise seems to have its own version of a hive-minded enemy that just swarms around through the universe, subjugating or destroying everything in its path. We have the Flood in Halo, the Zergs from StarCraft, and the Tyranids in Warhammer. The Borg Collective is Star Trek's take on the idea, and while they do differ from the aforementioned aliens in a lot of ways, there are some unmistakable similarities as well. While the Collective is undoubtedly super dangerous and can function independently on its own, it is the entity that gives it direction and a sense of purpose that is the topic of discussion. Known simply as the Borg Queen, she is the leader of the Borgs and the central node of the hive mind. She's connected to each and every Borg in existence, and they're compelled to obey her commands. While the collective itself might not know emotions and function primarily as drones led by the Queen, she is exactly the opposite. The Queen is driven by a desire to expand the Borg Empire and will do anything to achieve her goal. Unlike the drones she commands, she's capable of anger, fear, and pettiness. Another thing that makes her formidable is that she seems to be nigh immortal, as every time her body is destroyed, she makes a reappearance with a new body with her personality and memories intact. She's managed to travel back in time and assimilate the entire human race into the Borg Empire, including Picard, whom she tried to make a companion to help ease her loneliness. Her drive to assimilate was partly attributed to her desire to make a connection that would get rid of this feeling. The Queen also seems to possess a trans-temporal awareness that allows her to be aware of adjacent timelines and reality. Due to this, she has a faint inkling of the alternate reality created by Q in which the Borgs are completely decimated, and the universe is ruled by xenophobic humans. In this timeline, she allies herself with Picard and company to restore the timeline and revert reality to its original state. The Borg Queen is the manifestation of the collective's pursuit of perfection, as she is a perfect blend of the synthetic and the organic. However, what little remains of her organic self is overridden by her desire to do whatever it takes to further the Borg Empire. She functions just like the queen of an insect hive. However, in this case, the queen is extremely cunning, vindictive, malicious, and ruthless. The Wraiths. While the universe of Star Trek is filled with creatures of inexplicable powers and forms, they're usually explained as extremely advanced alien species. However, the Wraith adds an element of the true supernatural based on religion in the franchise. Dwelling within the Bajoran wormholes were incorporeal entities that were worshipped as prophets of the Bajoran faith. It was the only known stable wormhole within the Milky Way. It was called the Celestial Temple and was inhabited by these extra-dimensional beings. These entities were benevolent towards the Bajorans and led them with a steady hand, guiding them through their lives. These beings were called the Prophets, and they dwelt alongside the Wraiths in the Celestial Temple until they were banished to the fire caves in Bajor. The reason for this is not known. However, all evidence points to a schism in the group. The Wraiths are incorporeal, just like the Prophets, and possess the same powers as well. They're able to manifest in people's dreams and possess the body of individuals to do their bidding. In their incorporeal form, they seem to prefer manifesting as a fire spirit, which is what their name actually means when translated. Over the course of millennia, cults have begun emerging that worship the Wraith for a variety of reasons, none of which are good. The Wraiths are primarily focused on their conflict with the Prophets. However, they are not averse to ruthlessly using anyone that would benefit them in their quest. One must also not forget that if they were to ever overcome their main adversary, they would most likely turn their focus on the rest of the universe. For now, the majority of the Wraiths are sealed, but when one does break loose, you can be sure chaos is not far away. Lore. If this evil android looks familiar to you, it's because he is the twin brother of Data, built in their character Dr. Soong's own image. He was the first android with a positronic brain capable of extreme intelligence and physical feats. Lore's sentience was at a level where nothing like him had ever been created. However, his emotional side, which was also super advanced, begins to malfunction, leading him to see humans as severely flawed and inferior to himself. The colonists began fearing him and asked his creator to deactivate him. The emotionally unstable android believed that the humans were too jealous of him and began plotting his revenge. He was eventually deactivated and dismantled by Dr. Soong, but not before Lore had contacted the crystalline entity, which was a spaceborne lifeform that was capable of stripping away entire planets and space systems by consuming them. Following this, the entity would kill everybody on the planet, with the sole survivors being Lore and his freshly created brother Data. After being unwittingly reactivated, he would pretend to be cordial and helpful to the crew of the USS Enterprise. However, it would not be long before he fell back to his nefarious ways and summoned the crystalline entity once more in order to feed it to the crew of the Enterprise. Lore would become even more emotionally unstable after stealing a chip that was made by Soong for Data to feel human emotions. The chip would prove to be incompatible with Lore, leading him to become even more unstable. He would deactivate Data, wear his clothes, and pose as his brother. After a failed attempt to manipulate Data to join him, his personality merges with his brother, making him lose his individuality. One must not, however, forget that this android is perhaps the most evil character in all of Star Trek, as he was responsible for the genocide of an entire planet. Trelane. Trelane is another humanoid alien with extraordinary powers that the crew of the USS Enterprise encounters during one of their many adventures. Just like Q, he's an omnipotent alien with a penchant for creating mischief. This has led some fans to speculate that this may have been an alternate or even a younger version of Q. However, it's clear that Q and Trelane belong to entirely different species. Khan Noonien Singh. Khan is a psychotic criminal who will go to any lengths to go after the people he feels have wronged him, including risking his own life and those of innocents. On the surface, Khan tries to appear as a calm and collected man. However, it does little to hide his actual fragile personality, and he's quick to stomp out all dissent violently if required. He has a particular dislike for Captain Kirk, and takes personal pride in inflicting misery on the captain of the Enterprise. To do this, he doesn't even think twice about sacrificing the entire crew of the Enterprise, which comprises almost 400 people, as long as it meant that Kirk would suffer and die as well. He was the primary antagonist during the Eugenics War, and is revealed to be an extreme fascist who held the ideology that all he did was done in order to bring peace to the universe, while in reality, all he had done was serve his own ego and spread death and destruction everywhere. Despite looking down on everyone and considering others inferior to himself, he was not averse to showing respect to those he deemed brave and resourceful. With his genius-level intellect and enhanced physiology, Khan is a constant thorn in Kirk's side, and remains one of Star Trek's most iconic and recognized villains. The Gorn. The Gorn were a reptilian race stronger than most humanoids, with beastly speed and strength. Like most reptiles, the Gorn were cold-blooded and sought out warmer climates. While the Federation and other humans considered them to be savages and nothing more than animals due to their appearance, this was hardly the truth. The Gorn were part of a complex society called the Gorn hegemony. They also had rituals like getting married, and they were comprised of 2 genders. They were also fabled for brewing the finest mediator in the 5 systems. The word empathy is missing from the Gorn dictionary, and all that they hunt is either for food or entertainment. Their reptilian appearance naturally caused aversion to the humanoids, which was not aided by their hunting-based philosophy. The Gorn present a unique and formidable foe for the Federation and the crew of the Enterprise, who have faced them on multiple occasions now. General Chang. He serves as the primary villain of the 6th Star Trek film, The Undiscovered Country. Chang is a Klingon army officer who's one of the primary leaders of the Khitomer conspiracy. Before he was a general, Chang served as the head instructor at the Klingon Elite Academy. The Khitomer conspiracy is a group whose primary motivation is to hinder the peace talks between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. This brings him into direct conflict with our protagonist. His scheming sees both Kirk and McCoy being falsely accused of Gorkon's death. However, their names are both eventually cleared, thwarting the general's plans. When subtleties fail, he resorts to direct action by attempting to blow up the Enterprise mid-air while they're on their way to sign the peace treaties. This Shakespeare-loving Klingon is by far one of the most powerful and clever adversaries that Kirk and his crew have had to contend with over the years. The Founders. The Founders were a renegade group of changelings. Unlike most carbon-based life forms, the changelings have no solid state. They're in a constant fluid state and can take on the appearance of anything, whether it's organic or inorganic. These creatures were, however, not always like this, and had a single form like most organisms in the universe. However, it's not clear when and how they lost their single form and evolved into these beings. The changelings were reviled and mistrusted due to their ability when they came in contact with the so-called solids, which was the name they gave to other creatures. It resulted in them becoming reclusive and inhabiting an obscure planet where they started their society. However, a group of them believed that the solids were far too savage and that the fate of the universe could not be left in their hands. They believed that changelings needed to guide them in order to safeguard the universe from their threat. However, their definition of safeguarding was more like coercion and tyranny. They convinced a few primitive races that they were godlike beings and led these creatures to worship them. These changelings came to be called the Founders, and over the years have come into conflict with the so-called solids on numerous occasions. With a vast army and numerous planets under their rule who worship them as gods, they continue to spread peace and stability and guide the solids, and when they're refused, peace and stability are forced on their foes. Dukat. Dukat started as an officer in the Cardassian military and served as the prefect of Bajor during the final days of the Cardassian occupation of the planet. He would have a meteoric rise as the Cardassian Union leader after successfully negotiating Cardassia's entry into a hardline imperialistic state called the Dominion. Dukat would be convinced that the only way for Cardassia to regain their former glory was to side with the Dominion. He would go on to decimate Klingon, Maquis, and Federation forces and secure numerous early victories. Dukat would also be responsible for reopening the Bajoran wormhole, which would come back to bite him later in his war. He had done this as his trump card to bring in reinforcements from the Gamma Quadrant. What he didn't count on was the Prophets, who were not free and would destroy his reinforcements. The tide of the battle changed dramatically after that, and he was soundly defeated. As his plans fell apart, his beloved daughter Zeal would be murdered by his second-in-command, Damar. This would lead to the complete mental breakdown of Dukat, and he would begin studying old Bajoran texts, during which he would discover that the Bajoran wormhole was actually the Celestial Temple. He releases a paw wraith into his body and goes on to release the entity into the temple through the Orb of Contemplation, causing the wormhole to vanish. After he experiences being possessed by the paw wraith, he becomes their firm believer. He would work with Kai Wynn Adami and slowly convert her into following the paw wraith, with his ultimate goal being to free his new masters from their fiery prison and become their emissary. While initially he meant to betray her, she pulls a reverse Uno card on him and poisons him to complete the ritual to free the paw wraiths. However, the paw wraiths reject Wynn Adami as their emissary and instead resurrect Dukat to give him the position. However, while he's distracted by the events that have just transpired, Sisko manages to hurl both himself and Dukat into a fire, sealing him with his masters forever. Marvelous verdict. From murderous AIs to omnipotent aliens, there is nothing which this crew has yet to see. However, as the franchise makes its headway into the future at warp speed, we're sure that there will be more enemies for our heroes to face. Star Trek has one of the most dedicated fan bases in the world, and the lore and settings of the franchise are second to none. We hope that with this video, we were able to give you not only a list of villains, but also the scope of things that you can expect to see in the series. We have many more videos like this on our channel, and we cover all of your favorite TV shows, movies, and anime. So there's something for everyone. Thanks for sticking with us right to the end of the video. We hope to see you soon on the next Marvelous video. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.